Jeffrey Graney was 34 years old when his wife became CEO of the company they'd built together. And the first thing she did was hand him divorce papers across their kitchen table like he was a stranger she couldn't wait to forget. "Sign these," Jennifer said, her voice cold and clinical. The same voice that used to whisper loving words in the dark now sounded like she was terminating an underperforming employee. "My attorney says we can have this done in 60 days if you don't fight it." Jeffrey looked down at the documents, his hands trembling slightly. 15 years of marriage reduced to legal terminology and asset divisions. Outside their downtown Seattle penthouse windows, the city lights blurred through the November rain, and he felt something shift inside him. Not sadness, not anymore. Something else entirely. 60 days, he repeated slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't make this difficult, Jeffrey." Jennifer didn't even look up from her phone. Her freshly manicured nails, paid for with money from the company they'd built together, tapped against the screen with sharp, impatient clicks. "You'll get what's fair. The house in Bellevue, some savings. You should be grateful." What Jennifer didn't know, what she was about to discover in the most painful way possible, was that Jeffrey wasn't the nobody she'd convinced herself he was. And in exactly 60 days, her entire world would collapse in front of everyone who mattered. But that revelation was still weeks away. For now, Jeffrey sat in their kitchen, watching the woman he'd loved for 15 years treat their marriage like a corporate merger gone bad. The granite countertops gleamed under the recessed lighting, and the silence between them felt heavy enough to suffocate. "Why now?" Jeffrey finally asked, setting the papers down. His voice was steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs. "Why wait until you became CEO?" Jennifer's eyes flicked up, cold and distant. "Because I don't need you anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sharp, cutting, final. She continued, her tone matter-of-fact, as if explaining a business decision to a boardroom. "Let's be honest, Jeffrey. You were helpful when we were starting out. Your technical skills got us through those early years. But Cloud Tech Solutions has grown beyond that now. Beyond you. I'm running a $50 million company, and I need a partner who matches that level. Someone sophisticated, someone who understands the world I'm operating in now." Jeffrey felt his stomach drop. He'd suspected something was wrong for months. The late nights that turned into Jennifer not coming home at all, the cold distance that had settled between them like frost, the way she'd started looking at him with something close to contempt. But hearing it said so plainly, so cruelly, felt like a punch he hadn't braced for. "Someone like Brian Montgomery?" Jeffrey asked quietly. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered with something that might have been surprise. "Brian is a colleague, the CFO, that's all. A colleague who's been sleeping in our guest house for the past 3 months while I've been traveling for those critical client meetings you kept sending me on?" Now Jennifer's mask cracked, just slightly. Her jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic. And don't pretend you didn't know this was coming. We've been strangers for over a year." She stood up, smoothing down her designer suit. Armani, Jeffrey noted, purchased during her last trip to New York. A trip she'd taken alone. "Sign the papers, Jeffrey. Move on. Find someone at your level. This is better for both of us." At his level. The phrase stung more than Jeffrey wanted to admit. Like this video and subscribe now. There are new stories every time for you to watch and enjoy. Here's a hint. There's a twist coming that changes everything. Drop your theory in the comments. Let's see if anyone can figure it out before it happens. Jeffrey watched Jennifer walk out of the kitchen, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with sharp, dismissive finality. The sound echoed through the penthouse until the bedroom door closed behind her. And then there was only silence. He looked back down at the divorce papers. The settlement terms were outlined in cold, precise legal language. Jennifer would keep Cloud Tech Solutions, the company they'd founded together in their cramped studio apartment 12 years ago. The company Jeffrey had coded the entire original platform for, working 18-hour days while Jennifer handled sales and business development. The company that now employed 200 people and generated enough revenue to make them both wealthy. Jennifer would keep the company. Jeffrey would get the house in Bellevue, worth maybe $800,000, and a settlement of $2 million. On paper, it seemed generous. In reality, it was less than 15% of what cloud tech was worth, less than a fraction of what Jeffrey had helped build. But that wasn't what made Jeffrey's hands shake as he read through the paperwork. What made his pulse quicken was a clause buried in Section 12, subsection 4, a non-compete agreement that would prevent Jeffrey from working in the cloud computing industry for 5 years. Jennifer's attorney had crafted it carefully, using language that seemed reasonable on the surface, but would effectively destroy Jeffrey's career. She wasn't just leaving him, she was making sure he couldn't rebuild. Jeffrey set the papers down and walked to the window. Seattle stretched out below him, a maze of lights and rain-slicked streets. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives, coming home to partners who loved them, building futures together instead of tearing them apart. His phone buzzed. A text message from his sister, Claire. "How did it go? Did you tell her?" Jeffrey stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Not yet, soon." What Jennifer didn't know, what nobody except Claire and Jeffrey's attorney knew, was that Jeffrey wasn't just the technical co-founder of Cloud Tech Solutions. He was the majority shareholder. When they'd incorporated the company 11 years ago, Jeffrey had put up 80% of the initial capital, money from an inheritance after his father passed away. Jennifer had contributed 20% from her savings. The ownership split had been 75 to 25 in Jeffrey's favor. Simple math, fair division based on investment and risk. But 3 years ago, when Cloud Tech was starting to scale rapidly, Jennifer had convinced Jeffrey to restructure. She'd argued that having a clear CEO with majority control would make investors more confident. She'd shown him projections, introduced him to advisors who backed her claims, and slowly, systematically convinced him that for the good of the company, they needed to simplify the ownership structure. Jeffrey had trusted her, had loved her, had signed the paperwork she'd put in front of him without reading every detail. Or at least, that's what Jennifer thought. What Jeffrey had actually done was hire his own attorney, quietly, discreetly, who'd reviewed every document before Jeffrey signed anything. And what that attorney had discovered was fascinating. The restructuring Jennifer had proposed would have transferred majority control to her. Yes, but it also included clauses that were potentially illegal, buried in the fine print where she'd assumed Jeffrey wouldn't look. Jeffrey hadn't signed those documents. Instead, he'd signed modified versions that his attorney had prepared, keeping his majority stake while appearing to go along with Jennifer's plan. The paperwork had looked identical on the surface, same format, same general terms. But the key clauses, the ones that mattered, had been changed. Jennifer had never noticed. She'd been too confident, too sure of Jeffrey's blind trust, too convinced that the quiet, introverted tech guy she'd married would never think to protect himself. For 3 years, Jennifer had been running Cloud Tech Solutions, believing she owned 51% of the company. In reality, Jeffrey still owned 57%. He was the majority shareholder. He had voting control, and he'd been quietly documenting everything. Every decision Jennifer had made without proper board approval. Every expense she'd charged to the company that was actually personal. Every corner she'd cut that violated their corporate bylaws. Jeffrey had it all, organized in encrypted files that Jennifer didn't even know existed. And now she wanted a divorce. Jeffrey's phone buzzed again. Another text from Claire. "Remember what Dad always said? Don't get mad, get smart." Jeffrey smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. His father had been a corporate attorney for 35 years before he passed. He taught Jeffrey early on that the most powerful weapon in any negotiation wasn't anger or force. It was information, preparation, patience. "Let them think they've won," his father used to say. "Then show them the cards they didn't know you were holding." Jeffrey had been holding his cards for 3 years. Now it was almost time to play them. But not yet. Not until the moment was perfect. He looked back at the divorce papers on the table. Jennifer wanted 60 days? Fine. He'd give her 60 days. He'd sign the papers, play the role of the defeated husband, accepting his fate. He'd let her and Brian Montgomery celebrate their victory. Let them make plans for the future they thought they were building together. And then, on day 61, he'd destroy everything they'd built on lies. The next morning, Jeffrey found Jennifer in the home office, already on her third conference call of the day. She barely glanced up when he entered, just held up one finger in that universal gesture that meant, "Wait, I'm busy." Jeffrey waited. He'd gotten good at waiting. When Jennifer finally ended the call, she spun her chair to face him, her expression impatient. "What is it?" "I have back-to-back meetings all day." "I'll sign the papers," Jeffrey said simply. Jennifer's eyebrows raised slightly. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Jeffrey kept his voice neutral, defeated even. "You're right. We've been over for a while. No point dragging this out." Something flickered across Jennifer's face. Relief, Jeffrey thought. Maybe disappointment that he wasn't going to fight. Maybe both. People were complicated, even cruel ones. "That's very mature of you," Jennifer said, her tone softening just slightly. "I know this isn't easy. I just have one request," Jeffrey continued. "I'd like to stay involved with cloud tech until the divorce is final. Not in operations," he added quickly, seeing Jennifer's expression harden. "Just as an advisor. It would look better for both of us if there wasn't a sudden, dramatic split. Industry people will talk." Jennifer considered this, her fingers drumming against the desk. Jeffrey could see her calculating angles, weighing appearances against convenience. "Fine," she finally said. "You can keep your advisor title and stock options until the divorce is finalized, but you're not making any decisions. You're not attending board meetings. You're essentially a figurehead." "Understood," Jeffrey said. "Thank you." Jennifer nodded, already turning back to her computer. The conversation was over. Jeffrey was dismissed. As he left the office, Jeffrey allowed himself a small smile. Jennifer had just agreed to let him remain officially connected to the company for 2 more months, which meant he had full legal standing to access all company records, attend any meeting he wanted, and exercise any rights that came with his position. She had no idea what she just handed him. That evening, Jeffrey had dinner with Claire at a small restaurant in Capitol Hill. His sister was 2 years younger, a corporate attorney, who'd inherited their father's sharp mind and sharper instincts. "So she actually fell for it?" Claire asked, cutting into her salmon. "She thinks you're just going to roll over?" "She thinks I'm weak," Jeffrey said. "She's thought that for years. Maybe she's always thought it." Claire's expression softened. "Mark, you know that's not true. You built that company from nothing. The entire platform runs on code you wrote. And she built the business side. She's not wrong about that." Jeffrey took a sip of his wine, looking out the window at the rain. "I was never the salesperson, never the networker. Jennifer has always been better at that world. Being good at selling doesn't give her the right to steal everything you built together." "No," Jeffrey agreed. "It doesn't." Claire leaned forward, lowering her voice even though the restaurant was nearly empty. "Do you have everything you need?" Jeffrey nodded. "Financial records going back 3 years. Documentation of every decision she made without board approval. Emails proving she knew about the non-compete clause in the divorce settlement and specifically designed it to destroy my career. And," he paused, "proof that she's been funneling company money to Brian Montgomery through fake consulting contracts." Claire's eyes widened. "Embezzlement? Technically, yes. About $400,000 over 18 months. Brian's consulting firm doesn't actually do any work. It's just a way for Jennifer to pay him using company funds." "Jesus, Jeffrey, that's not just unethical. That's criminal." "I know." Jeffrey's voice was quiet. "I didn't want to believe it at first. Kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an explanation. But the evidence is clear." They sat in silence for a moment. Rain drummed against the windows, and somewhere in the kitchen, dishes clattered. "What's your end game here?" Claire finally asked. "What do you actually want?" Jeffrey had been asking himself that question for weeks. The truth was complicated. Part of him still loved Jennifer, or at least loved the woman she used to be. The woman who'd believed in their dream when they were working out of that tiny apartment, living on ramen and hope. The woman who'd stayed up with him during those endless coding sessions, bringing him coffee and telling him he was brilliant. But that woman was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. Maybe Jeffrey had just seen what he wanted to see. "I want cloud tech," Jeffrey said finally. "I want full control of the company I built. I want Jennifer and Brian gone. And I want everyone who watched her treat me like I was worthless to know the truth." Claire studied her brother's face. This is going to be ugly, Mark." "I know." Jennifer won't go quietly. She'll fight. She'll make accusations. She'll try to destroy your reputation. Let her try. Jeffrey's voice was steady. I have the truth. I have the documentation. And I have something she doesn't. What's that? Jeffrey smiled, though his eyes remained cold. Patience. Over the next 3 weeks, Jeffrey played his role perfectly. He was the quiet, defeated husband, accepting his fate with dignity. He attended a few cloud tech meetings as requested, sitting silently in the back, offering no opinions. He started packing up his things from the penthouse, moving them slowly to the Bellevue house that would soon be his alone. Jennifer and Brian grew bolder. Jeffrey would catch them exchanging looks across conference tables, little smiles that said they'd gotten away with something. Once he came home early and heard them laughing in the guest house. Brian's laugh deep and confident, Jennifer's bright with the kind of joy she hadn't shown Jeffrey in years. It hurt. Jeffrey wouldn't pretend it didn't. But the hurt was fuel now, driving him forward. His attorney, David Loff, no relation, though they joked about it, had everything ready. The paperwork was prepared. The evidence was organized. All they needed was the right moment. That moment came on a Friday afternoon in mid-December, exactly 45 days after Jennifer had handed Jeffrey the divorce papers. Cloud Tech Solutions was hosting its annual board meeting and holiday party. It was a big event held at an upscale hotel downtown with the board members, major investors, key employees, and various industry partners all in attendance. Jennifer had spent weeks planning it, determined to make her first board meeting as CEO a triumph. Jeffrey received his invitation like everyone else. Jennifer probably assumed he wouldn't come, that he'd stay home and avoid the awkwardness. But Jeffrey had RSVP'd yes, and he showed up in his best suit, looking calm and composed. The hotel ballroom was decorated with winter lights and subtle Cloud Tech branding. A bar in the corner served expensive wine. Servers circulated with hors d'oeuvres. Everyone who mattered in Seattle's tech scene seemed to be there. Jennifer stood near the center of the room, wearing a stunning red dress, holding court with Brian Montgomery at her side. She looked powerful, confident, successful. She saw Jeffrey enter and her expression flickered, surprise then irritation. But she was too professional to make a scene. She simply turned back to her conversation, dismissing his presence. Jeffrey found Claire near the bar. His sister was there as his attorney, perfectly legitimate for the company's majority shareholder to have legal representation at a board meeting. Ready? Claire asked quietly. Jeffrey looked across the room at Jennifer, at Brian, at all the people who'd watched Jennifer treat him like he was insignificant, who'd probably gossiped about how the CEO's husband couldn't keep up with her success. Ready, Jeffrey said. The formal board meeting was scheduled to start in 30 minutes, but it wouldn't go the way Jennifer had planned, not even close, because Jeffrey Graney was about to remind everyone in that room exactly who built Cloud Tech Solutions and exactly who had the power to tear it all down. The board meeting began at 7 o'clock sharp. Jennifer stood at the front of the conference room adjacent to the ballroom, her presentation slides glowing behind her on the massive screen. She looked every inch the confident CEO, shoulders back, voice strong, commanding the room with practiced ease. Jeffrey sat in the back row, Claire beside him. The other board members, 5 in total, occupied the front seats. Brian Montgomery sat to Jennifer's right, his posture casual but his eyes alert. He'd grown comfortable in these spaces, Jeffrey noted, comfortable with Jennifer's power, comfortable thinking he'd won. As you can see from Q4 projections, Jennifer was saying, clicking through slides that showed Cloud Tech's impressive growth trajectory, we're positioned for a breakthrough year. The enterprise clients we've secured in the past quarter alone represent a 42% revenue increase. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. Jennifer smiled, feeding off the energy. And I want to thank our CFO, Brian Montgomery, for his invaluable contribution to these negotiations. Jennifer gestured toward Brian. His financial strategies have been instrumental. Brian nodded, accepting the praise with practiced humility that made Jeffrey's stomach turn. Those financial strategies included embezzling $400,000, but nobody in this room knew that. Not yet. Jennifer continued for another 20 minutes, outlining expansion plans, hiring projections, and potential acquisition targets. She was good at this, Jeffrey had to admit. She painted a vision that made everyone want to buy in, want to be part of cloud tech's future. Finally, she reached the last slide. Before we wrap up the formal portion, I want to address a personal matter. As many of you know, Jeffrey Graney and I are divorcing. The room went quiet. Jeffrey felt eyes shift toward him, curious and uncomfortable. This is obviously difficult, Jennifer continued, her voice taking on a softer, more vulnerable tone. But I want to assure everyone that this personal change won't affect CloudTech's operations. Jeffrey will be transitioning out of his advisory role, and we'll be moving forward with a clean separation of personal and professional interests. She paused, and Jeffrey saw something flicker in her expression. Sadness? Guilt? Or just a well-practiced simulation of both? I'll always be grateful for Jeffrey's early contributions to CloudTech, Jennifer said. He was essential in those founding years. But companies evolve, and so do people. I think we can all agree that CloudTech's future is bright, and that requires leadership that matches our ambitions. The subtext was clear. Jeffrey was the past. Jennifer was the future. Several board members nodded sympathetically. Jeffrey recognized the look. They'd bought Jennifer's narrative completely. The brilliant CEO who'd outgrown her husband. The woman who'd carried the company on her back while Jeffrey had simply written code. It was time to correct that story. Jeffrey stood up. The movement was sudden enough that conversation faltered. Jennifer's eyes snapped to him, surprised and annoyed. Jeffrey, she said, her voice carrying a warning. This isn't the appropriate time. Actually, Jennifer, it's the perfect time. Jeffrey's voice was calm, almost gentle. He looked around the room at the board members, at Brian Montgomery's suddenly tense expression, at Claire, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Jeffrey should do next. I'd like to exercise my right as majority shareholder to call for an emergency vote, Jeffrey continued. The room went silent. Someone's pen dropped, the sound sharp in the sudden quiet. Jennifer's face went pale. What did you just say? My right as majority shareholder, Jeffrey repeated. He walked slowly toward the front of the room, his footsteps measured and deliberate. I own 57% of CloudTech Solutions. I have voting control, and I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current CEO. That's not possible. Jennifer's voice had lost its confident smoothness. I own 51%. We restructured 3 years ago. I signed documents, Jeffrey agreed, but not the ones you think I did. He nodded to Claire, who stood and began distributing folders to each board member. The folders were thick, professionally bound, with CloudTech's logo on the front. What is this? One of the board members, Thomas Bradford, opened his folder. Documentation, Jeffrey said simply. The first section contains the actual ownership structure of CloudTech Solutions. You'll see that I've been the majority shareholder all along. The restructuring Jennifer believes happened never actually went through. My attorney reviewed and modified the final documents before I signed them. Jennifer signed what she thought was her version. I signed the corrected version. Both sets went to the state, but mine were filed first and properly notarized. Jennifer's hands were shaking. Jeffrey noticed the tremor and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. You're lying. This is some kind of fraud. It's not fraud to have your attorney review documents before you sign them, Claire interjected, her voice crisp and professional. It's called due diligence, something Jennifer apparently didn't do before assuming she'd successfully stolen majority control of her husband's company. Brian Montgomery stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Jennifer has been running this company for 3 years. Jeffrey has barely been involved. You can't just... Please see Section 2 of your folders, Jeffrey interrupted, his voice still infuriatingly calm. That's where things get interesting. Thomas Bradford was already flipping pages, his expression growing darker. These are expense reports, flagged expenses. This consulting contract with... He looked up sharply at Brian. With Montgomery Financial Consulting. $8,000 a month for 18 months. That's a legitimate business expense, Brian said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I provide financial advisory services. Do you? Jeffrey pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and an image appeared on the presentation screen behind Jennifer, replacing her carefully crafted slides. Because according to state business records, Montgomery Financial Consulting was registered 3 days after you began work at Cloud Tech as CFO. It has no other clients. It provides no actual services. It exists solely as a vehicle for Jennifer to funnel company money to you. The room erupted. Board members were talking over each other, demanding explanations. Jennifer was saying something about misunderstandings and accounting errors, but her voice sounded hollow, desperate. Jeffrey pulled up another image. Bank statements, transfer records, emails, each one more damning than the last. Section 3 documents every financial decision Jennifer made without proper board approval over the past 3 years. Jeffrey continued, she's violated our corporate bylaws 47 times. She's made unauthorized expenditures totaling over $2 million, and she's been using company resources to pay her, he paused, letting the word hang, boyfriend. This is a setup, Jennifer said, but her voice cracked. Jeffrey is trying to sabotage me because I asked for a divorce. This is revenge. No, Jeffrey said quietly. This is justice. There's a difference. He turned to address the board directly. I didn't want to do this publicly. I hoped we could resolve this quietly after the divorce. But Jennifer forced my hand. She included a non-compete clause in the divorce settlement that would prevent me from working in my own industry for 5 years. Not because it was necessary for any legitimate reason, but because she wanted to make sure I couldn't rebuild after she took everything I'd helped create. He pulled up one more document on the screen, an email from Jennifer to her divorce attorney. Make sure the non-compete is ironclad. I don't want Jeffrey able to work anywhere in cloud computing. He needs to understand he can't compete at my level. This is as much about sending a message as protecting cloud tech. The cruelty of the words hung in the air. Several board members looked away, uncomfortable. Thomas Bradford's expression had turned to disgust. You wanted to destroy me, Jeffrey said, looking directly at Jennifer. Not for any business reason, not to protect the company, just because you could, because you thought I was weak, thought I would just accept whatever you decided to give me. Jennifer's face was a mask of shock and fury. You had no right to access my private communications. I had every right, Claire interrupted. As majority shareholder, Jeffrey has access to all company communications, including those sent from company email accounts, which you used for personal matters repeatedly, including coordinating your affair with Mr. Montgomery. Brian had gone completely still, his face ashen. He looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. I moved a vote, Jeffrey said formally. All those in favor of removing Jennifer Graney as CEO of Cloud Tech Solutions, effective immediately? For a long moment, nobody moved. The board members looked at each other, at the documentation in front of them, at Jennifer's stricken face. Then Thomas Bradford raised his hand. I vote yes. Another hand went up, then another. Within seconds, all 5 board members had voted to remove Jennifer. She stood there frozen as the reality crashed over her. Everything she'd built her identity around, the CEO title, the power, the respect, was being stripped away in front of everyone who mattered. This isn't over, she said, but her voice shook. I'll fight this. I'll sue. You'll do what exactly? Jeffrey asked. Sue me for exercising my legal rights as majority shareholder? Sue the board for voting to remove a CEO who violated corporate bylaws dozens of times? You're welcome to try, Jennifer. I have 3 years of documentation. Take me to court. I'll win. The silence that followed was absolute. Jeffrey could hear his own heartbeat, could feel every eye in the room fixed on the scene unfolding. Jennifer's chest was rising and falling rapidly, her face flushed with humiliation and rage. She looked at Brian, who wouldn't meet her eyes, looked at the board members, who were carefully studying their folders, looked finally at Jeffrey, and he saw the moment she truly understood what had happened. She'd underestimated him, completely, totally, and it was going to cost her everything. Get out, Jennifer said, her voice barely a whisper. Both of you, get out of my company. It's not your company, Jeffrey said gently. It never was. Jennifer grabbed her purse and walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The same sharp, dismissive sound Jeffrey had heard the night she'd handed him the divorce papers. But this time, she was the one leaving in defeat. Brian followed her, moving quickly, not looking back. The door closed behind them, and the room slowly came back to life. Board members were murmuring, some looking shaken, others impressed. Thomas Bradford approached Jeffrey. That was... He struggled for words. I'm not sure what I just witnessed. Justice, Claire said quietly. Thomas nodded slowly. I suppose it was. Jeffrey, I apologize. We should have been paying closer attention to company operations. This should never have gotten this far. It's not your fault, Jeffrey said. Jennifer was very good at appearing competent. The problems were deliberately hidden. What happens now? Another board member asked. Does the company have a CEO? Jeffrey looked around the room. These were people who'd built their careers on judging leadership, on understanding organizational dynamics. They just watched him dismantle Jennifer's facade with patience and precision. They knew what came next. I'll take over as CEO, Jeffrey said, effective immediately. We'll need to do some damage control, repair relationships with clients who might have questions, and conduct a full financial audit. But cloud tech will survive this. We'll be stronger for it. Thomas extended his hand. I think that's the right call. They shook hands and Jeffrey felt something settle in his chest. Relief maybe, or vindication, or just the satisfaction of being seen accurately for the first time in years. The formal meeting adjourned, and people began filing out toward the holiday party still happening in the ballroom. Claire pulled Jeffrey aside. How do you feel? She asked. Jeffrey considered the question. Tired, sad, relieved, angry, all of it at once. That's reasonable. Claire squeezed his shoulder. You did the right thing, Mark. You know that, right? I know I did the legal thing, Jeffrey said. Whether it was the right thing, I guess time will tell. They walked back into the ballroom together. The party was still going, though word had clearly spread. People were clustered in small groups, whispering, casting curious glances at Jeffrey. Some looked sympathetic, some looked impressed. A few looked wary, probably wondering what Jeffrey knew about their own dealings with the company. Jeffrey found a quiet corner and pulled out his phone. He had dozens of messages. News traveled fast in Seattle's tech scene, but one message caught his attention. It was from an unknown number. Well played, Mr. Graney. If you ever need legal counsel for the inevitable lawsuit Jennifer will file, call me. David Park, Harrison and Park LLP. Jeffrey smiled slightly. The vultures were already circling, smelling blood in the water. Jennifer would indeed sue. She'd fight this with everything she had. But Jeffrey had fought his battle already, in silence and shadow for 3 years. Whatever came next, he was ready. He was about to put his phone away when it rang. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. Jeffrey hesitated, then answered. Jennifer. How long? Her voice was ragged, stripped of all its usual confidence. How long have you known? About the ownership structure? 3 years. About you and Brian? About 18 months. About the embezzlement? About a year. A sharp intake of breath. You've just been watching? Waiting? Yes. Why? The word came out as almost a sob. Why didn't you just confront me? Why did you have to destroy me in front of everyone? Jeffrey looked across the ballroom at all the people who'd watched Jennifer treat him like he was worthless, who'd seen her parade Brian around like a trophy, who'd heard her casual cruelty and said nothing. Because, Jeffrey said quietly, you didn't just want to leave me. You wanted to destroy me. The non-compete clause, Jennifer. You wanted to make sure I couldn't rebuild, that I couldn't compete. You wanted me to know I'd lost everything while you won everything. So I let you think you had won, and then I showed you what losing actually looks like. Silence on the other end. Then, I loved you once. I know, Jeffrey said. I loved you too. But love doesn't excuse what you did. What happens now? Now you face the consequences. The board will likely recommend we file charges for the embezzlement. The divorce will proceed, but on very different terms. And you'll need to find a new career, because you'll never work in this industry again. Not after tonight. Another long silence. Then Jennifer hung up without another word. Jeffrey stood there in the middle of the party, holding his silent phone, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. He'd won, decisively, completely. So why did he still feel hollow? Claire appeared at his elbow with 2 glasses of wine. "Drink," she commanded. Jeffrey took the glass and drank. The wine was expensive, probably something Jennifer had selected for the party. He wondered if she'd thought about this moment when she'd ordered it, imagined herself celebrating her triumph as CEO while Jeffrey sat at home alone. The universe had a sense of irony, apparently. "Reporters are already calling," Claire said. "TechCrunch got wind of something happening. How do you want to handle the press?" Jeffrey thought about it. The old Jeffrey, the quiet, introverted Jeffrey who'd been happy coding in the background, would have hidden from the spotlight, let someone else handle communications. But that Jeffrey had been taken advantage of, had been betrayed, had been assumed to be weak. The new Jeffrey knew better. "I'll give a statement tomorrow," he said. "Factual, professional, will control the narrative." Claire nodded approvingly. "I'll help you draft it." They stood together, watching the party continue around them. People were starting to approach Jeffrey now, cautiously at first, then with increasing boldness. Investors who wanted to assure him of their continued support. Employees who wanted to congratulate him. Even a few people who'd ignored him for years suddenly finding him fascinating. Jeffrey handled each conversation with the same calm professionalism he'd shown in the board meeting. He answered questions, made reassuring statements about CloudTech's future, accepted congratulations with grace. But inside, part of him was still in that kitchen, watching Jennifer hand him divorce papers with contempt in her eyes. Part of him was still the husband who'd been betrayed, the partner who'd been stolen from, the man who'd been told he wasn't enough. Victory tasted sweeter than he'd expected, but it also tasted like ash. Around midnight, Jeffrey finally left the hotel. The rain had stopped and Seattle's winter air was crisp and cold against his face. He walked to his car alone, his footsteps echoing in the parking garage. His phone buzzed one more time. Another unknown number. Against his better judgment, Jeffrey answered. "Mr. Graney?" A woman's voice. Professional. Familiar somehow. "This is Rebecca Morrison. I work at the Seattle Times business section. I was hoping—" "No comment," Jeffrey said automatically. "I understand. But Mr. Graney, I've been following CloudTech's growth for years. And I have to ask, did you plan this? Was this revenge?" Jeffrey paused with his hand on his car door. It was a good question. Had this been revenge? Or justice? Or just self-defense taken to its logical conclusion? "Ms. Morrison," he said finally, "I didn't plan to be betrayed. I didn't plan to discover my wife was embezzling from the company we'd built. I didn't plan for any of this. But once I knew the truth, I had a choice. I could accept the role Jennifer had written for me, the weak, disposable husband who'd served his purpose, or I could stand up for myself. I chose the latter." "So this wasn't revenge?" "No," Jeffrey said. "It was consequences. Sometimes people confuse the two." He hung up before she could ask another question. Jeffrey drove home through empty streets, his mind replaying the evening's events on an endless loop. Every moment, every expression on Jennifer's face as she realized what was happening. Every board member's vote. He'd won. But what had he actually won? Control of a company he'd have to rebuild. A reputation that would always include tonight's events. A divorce that would be even messier now. And loneliness, so much loneliness. Jeffrey pulled into the driveway of the Bellevue house, the one that was supposed to be his consolation prize. Most of his things were already here, boxes stacked in the garage waiting to be unpacked. But as he sat in the dark car, engine cooling and ticking in the silence, Jeffrey realized something. He didn't want this house. Didn't want the life Jennifer had tried to force him into. Didn't want to be defined by what he'd lost or what he'd won. He wanted to build something new, something authentic. Tomorrow he'd meet with the board, start the audit, begin the process of healing CloudTech and turning it into the company it should have been all along. But tonight, Jeffrey just sat in the darkness and let himself feel everything. The hurt, the anger, the vindication, the emptiness. He'd won the battle. Now came the harder part, figuring out what came after victory. His phone buzzed one last time. A text from Claire. "Proud of you, little brother. Dad would be too." Jeffrey smiled, though tears stung his eyes. His father had taught him patience, strategy, the importance of playing the long game. Jeffrey had learned those lessons well, but there was one more lesson his father had tried to teach him, one Jeffrey hadn't understood until tonight. Winning isn't the hard part. Son, it's knowing what you're actually fighting for. Jeffrey finally understood. He'd thought he was fighting for justice, for vindication, for the company he'd built. But really, he'd been fighting for something simpler, more fundamental. He'd been fighting for the right to be seen as he actually was. Not as Jennifer's accessory, not as the technical guy who'd served his purpose, but as Jeffrey Graney, capable, intelligent, worthy of respect. He'd won that fight. Now he just had to figure out what to do with the victory. Monday morning arrived with surprising normalcy. Jeffrey woke up in the Bellevue house, made coffee in a kitchen that still felt temporary, and dressed for work like this was any other day. Except, of course, it wasn't. He was now the acting CEO of Cloud Tech Solutions, and he had a company to save. The drive to the downtown Seattle office took 30 minutes through traffic. Jeffrey used the time to mentally prepare, going through the list of immediate tasks. Financial audit, staff meeting, damage control with clients, communication with investors. The list went on. When he pulled into the parking garage, Jeffrey noticed something unusual. The reserved space marked CEO was empty. Jennifer's silver Tesla wasn't there. For 3 years, that car had been a constant presence, a symbol of her dominance in the space they'd shared. Now it was just an empty parking spot. Jeffrey parked in the visitor section. He changed the signage later and took the elevator to the 8th floor. The Cloud Tech offices occupied the entire level, all glass walls and open workspaces designed to foster collaboration. Jennifer had spent a fortune redesigning the space last year. It was beautiful, modern, and it suddenly felt very empty. The receptionist, a young woman named Stephanie, looked up as Jeffrey entered. Her eyes widened with recognition and something that might have been awe. Mr. Graney, good morning. Welcome. Good morning, Stephanie. Jeffrey gave her what he hoped was a reassuring smile. Is the senior staff assembled in the conference room? Yes, sir. They've been waiting since 8. Jeffrey checked his watch. 8:15. He deliberately arrived late, let them wait just long enough to feel the weight of what was happening. The conference room fell silent when Jeffrey entered. 6 faces looked up at him. The heads of engineering, sales, marketing, operations, HR, and legal. These were the people who'd worked most closely with Jennifer. Some looked curious, others looked worried. All of them looked uncertain. Good morning, Jeffrey said, taking the seat at the head of the table. Jennifer's seat. I'm sure you all have questions. Let me start by being direct. Jennifer Graney is no longer CEO of Cloud Tech Solutions. I've assumed that role effective immediately. This change is permanent, not temporary. Sarah Kim, the head of HR, cleared her throat. With all respect, Mr. Graney, can you tell us what happened? The rumors flying around are varied. I imagine they are. Jeffrey pulled out his tablet and brought up a document. Here's what I can tell you. An emergency board vote was held Friday evening. The vote was unanimous to remove Jennifer as CEO due to multiple violations of corporate policy and fiduciary duty. I won't go into specifics right now, but everything was done according to our bylaws and with full legal authority. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Jeffrey's situation. David Singh, the engineering lead, leaned forward. Is the company in trouble? Should we be worried about layoffs? The company is not in trouble, Jeffrey assured him. Our technology is solid, our clients are happy, and our financials are strong. What we do need is a complete audit to ensure everything is above board going forward. There will be changes, yes, but Cloud Tech isn't going anywhere. What about Brian Montgomery? This from Janet Torres, the head of sales. Is he still CFO? Mr. Montgomery resigned Friday evening, Jeffrey said, his voice neutral. We'll be conducting a search for a new CFO. In the interim, our accounting firm will help manage financial operations. More questions followed, each one probing at different aspects of the situation. Jeffrey answered what he could, deflected what he couldn't, and generally tried to project calm confidence. These people needed to believe cloud tech had a future, and Jeffrey needed to be the one to convince them. The meeting lasted an hour. By the end, the senior staff looked somewhat reassured, though still uncertain about what the transition would mean for their departments. As everyone filed out, Janet Torres hung back. She was in her 50s, a veteran of Seattle's tech scene who joined Cloud Tech 2 years ago. She closed the conference room door. "Can I speak honestly?" Janet asked. "Please." "A lot of us saw what Jennifer was doing to you, the way she treated you at company events, the dismissive comments, the way she'd roll her eyes when you tried to contribute to discussions." Janet's expression was serious. "Some of us thought it was wrong, but nobody said anything because, well, she was the CEO. Jeffrey felt something twist in his chest. They'd known, they'd seen, and they'd said nothing. "I don't blame anyone for staying quiet," Jeffrey said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "People need their jobs." "Maybe," Janet said, "but I want you to know. I'm glad you're in charge now. Jennifer was brilliant at sales, I won't take that from her. But she'd become ruthless, started treating people as disposable. The culture here was getting toxic." She paused. "You might not believe this, but people are relieved." After Janet left, Jeffrey sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes. He'd been so focused on Jennifer's betrayal of him personally that he hadn't fully considered how her behavior had affected the entire company. How many other people had she treated poorly? How many employees had felt the same casual cruelty Jeffrey had experienced? His phone rang, an unknown number again, but Jeffrey was getting used to that. Jeffrey Graney. "Mr. Graney, this is Diane Pasternak from the Washington State Attorney General's office." Jeffrey's stomach dropped. "How can I help you, Ms. Pasternak? We've received information regarding possible financial irregularities at Cloud Tech Solutions, specifically allegations of embezzlement and misuse of corporate funds. I'm calling to request your cooperation with an investigation." So it had begun. Someone, probably one of the board members, had filed a formal complaint. The legal machinery was grinding into motion. "I'm happy to cooperate fully," Jeffrey said. "In fact, I've been compiling evidence for the past year. I can provide you with complete documentation." There was a pause. "You've been investigating internally?" "I discovered the irregularities about a year ago. I documented everything while deciding how to proceed." "I see." Diane Pasternak's voice had shifted from official to interested. "Mr. Graney, would you be available to meet this week? I think we should discuss this in detail." They scheduled a meeting for Wednesday afternoon. After hanging up, Jeffrey sat back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. Jennifer wasn't just losing her job. She was potentially facing criminal charges. Part of him felt vindicated, but another part, the part that had loved her for 15 years, just felt sad. The rest of Monday was consumed with meetings, emails, and phone calls. Clients wanted reassurance. Investors wanted explanations. Employees wanted to know if their jobs were secure. Jeffrey handled each conversation with the same patient professionalism, slowly building confidence that Cloud Tech would survive its sudden leadership change. By 5 o'clock, Jeffrey was exhausted. He was preparing to leave when Stephanie called from reception. "Mr. Graney, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." "Who is it?" He paused. "Jennifer Graney." Jeffrey's first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity and perhaps some lingering sense of obligation made him agree. "Send her to my office." He waited, standing by the window that looked out over Seattle's downtown. The city stretched below, lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. In the reflection, Jeffrey saw the office door open behind him. Jennifer looked terrible. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, clothing Jeffrey recognized from years ago, before the designer suits and expensive accessories. She looked, Jeffrey realized, like the woman he'd married. Young and vulnerable and human. "Thank you for seeing me," Jennifer said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. "You said it was urgent." "I've been getting calls from attorneys, the Attorney General's office, the IRS. Jeffrey, they're saying I could face criminal charges, that I could go to prison." Jeffrey turned to face her fully. Is that why you're here? To ask me to make this go away? Can you? Hope flared in Jennifer's eyes, desperate and pathetic. No, Jeffrey said. I didn't file the complaints. The board did, or possibly one of the investors. I don't control what happens next. That's up to the legal system. Jennifer's face crumpled. She sank into one of the office chairs, her hands covering her face. My whole life is destroyed. My career, my reputation, everything. All because of one mistake. One mistake? Jeffrey's voice hardened. Jennifer, you embezzled $400,000. You violated corporate policy dozens of times. You put the entire company at risk. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of behavior. I know, Jennifer whispered. I know. But Jeffrey, we built this company together. Doesn't that count for something? Can't you find it in yourself to help me? Jeffrey studied her. There was genuine remorse in her expression, real fear in her eyes. But there was also manipulation. The tears timed perfectly, the trembling voice, the appeal to their shared history. She'd always been good at selling. I'm not going to lie for you, Jeffrey said. I'm not going to hide evidence or downplay what happened. You made choices, Jennifer. Now you live with the consequences. Even if it means I go to prison? Even then. Jennifer looked up at him, and for a moment Jeffrey saw real hatred flash across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by resignation. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as a partner, started seeing you as an obstacle. And once I started thinking that way, it became easy to justify everything else. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. Jennifer stood up, wiping her eyes. And because I need you to understand that I didn't start out wanting to destroy you, I just got lost somewhere, got caught up in power and success, and forgot what actually mattered. She walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. After she left, Jeffrey stood alone in his office for a long time. The sky outside had darkened fully, and the city lights glittered like scattered diamonds. Jennifer's apology had felt genuine, but did that change anything? Did remorse excuse betrayal? Did understanding someone's motivations mean forgiving their actions? Jeffrey didn't know. He was too tired to know. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of work. Jeffrey threw himself into rebuilding cloud tech, meeting with every department, reviewing every process, slowly reshaping the company into something that reflected his values instead of Jennifer's. The media attention was intense at first. Tech blogs ran stories about the dramatic boardroom confrontation. Business publications analyzed the legal implications. A few sympathetic pieces appeared defending Jennifer, painting Jeffrey as a vindictive ex-husband. More pieces praised his patience and strategic thinking. Jeffrey ignored most of it. He'd said what he needed to say in one carefully crafted statement. Everything else was noise. The Attorney General's investigation moved forward. Jeffrey met with Diane Pasternak twice, providing detailed documentation of every financial irregularity he'd discovered. The evidence was damning. Jennifer would likely face charges. Brian Montgomery had vanished entirely. His LinkedIn profile disappeared. His phone went straight to voicemail. According to Claire's sources, he'd moved to Portland and was working at a small accounting firm under a different name. Jennifer, to her credit, didn't run. She hired a criminal defense attorney and prepared to face whatever consequences were coming. A month after the board meeting, Jeffrey sat in his apartment. He'd sold the Bellevue house and bought something smaller, simpler, reviewing the company's quarterly report. Cloud tech had actually grown during the transition. Clients appreciated the transparency. Employees responded to the improved culture. The numbers were strong. His phone rang. Not unknown this time. He recognized the number as Claire's. Hey, he answered. Are you sitting down? Claire asked. Should I be? Jennifer took a plea deal. She's pleading guilty to embezzlement and financial fraud. In exchange for cooperation and full restitution, the prosecution is recommending 2 years in prison with possibility of parole after 18 months. Jeffrey processed this. When? Sentencing is next month. She wanted me to tell you that she won't fight the divorce anymore. She's agreeing to all your terms. She'll sign whatever you want. Does she need money? Jeffrey found himself asking. Mark, does she? A sigh. Her legal fees have cleaned her out. She's broke. Her parents are helping, but they're retired and don't have much to spare. Jeffrey thought about the young woman he'd married, the one who'd believed in their dream, who'd stayed up late helping him debug code even though she didn't understand programming, who'd held his hand at his father's funeral and promised they'd build something beautiful together. That woman and this woman were the same person, somehow. Tell her I'll pay for a good defense attorney, Jeffrey said, not to get the charges dropped, but to make sure she gets fair representation. Jeffrey, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, but she was right about one thing. We did build this together in the beginning, before everything went wrong. I can't forget that just because I'm angry. 3 weeks later, Jeffrey sat in a courthouse, watching Jennifer stand before a judge. She looked small in her conservative suit, her hair pulled back, her face carefully neutral. The judge reviewed the plea agreement, asked Jennifer if she understood the terms, confirmed she was entering the plea voluntarily. Jennifer answered each question in a quiet, steady voice. Ms. Graney, the judge said finally, do you have anything you'd like to say before I pronounce sentence? Jennifer looked down at her hands. Then she looked up and her eyes found Jeffrey in the gallery. I'd like to apologize, she said, to the people I hurt, to the company I damaged, and especially to my husband, my ex-husband, who I betrayed in the worst ways possible. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you all to know that I understand what I did was wrong, deeply wrong, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be better than I was. The judge nodded. Ms. Graney, I hereby sentence you to 24 months in a federal correctional facility with eligibility for parole after 18 months served. You're also ordered to pay full restitution to Cloud Tech Solutions and will be barred from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company for 10 years. The gavel came down. Jennifer closed her eyes briefly, then opened them and nodded. She'd known this was coming, had prepared for it. As the bailiffs led her away, Jennifer looked back one more time at Jeffrey. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just looked at him with an expression that might have been gratitude or might have been goodbye. Then she was gone. Jeffrey left the courthouse and found Claire waiting outside. How do you feel? She asked. It was becoming his least favorite question, but Jeffrey tried to answer honestly. I feel like something ended, finally, completely. That's probably healthy. They walked to a nearby coffee shop, ordered expensive lattes neither of them would finish, and sat by the window watching people hurry past on the sidewalk. What happens now? Claire asked. Jeffrey thought about Cloud Tech, about the company he was building into something good and sustainable, about the team that was starting to trust him, about the future that suddenly seemed wide open instead of predetermined. Now I figure out who I am when I'm not defined by her, Jeffrey said, when I'm not the betrayed husband or the vindicated winner or the patient strategist. Just Jeffrey. Building something worth building. Sounds lonely. Maybe, for a while. Jeffrey smiled slightly. But I've been lonely before. At least this time, I'm choosing it. 6 months later, Cloud Tech Solutions announced record profits. Jeffrey had restructured the company around sustainable growth rather than rapid expansion. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. 3 major clients had signed long-term contracts. Jeffrey was sitting in his office reviewing the numbers when Stephanie buzzed. Mr. Graney, there's a call from the Federal Correctional Institution at Victorville. Someone named Jennifer Graney is asking to speak with you. Jeffrey had been expecting this call, though he wasn't sure why. Put it through. The line clicked. Then Jennifer's voice, sounding strange and distant. Jeffrey, hi. Hi, Jennifer. I wasn't sure you'd take the call. I almost didn't. A pause. In the background, Jeffrey could hear other voices, the ambient noise of a prison common area. I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking a lot in here about choices and consequences and who I became. And I realized something. You showed me mercy I didn't deserve. What do you mean? The attorney you paid for. The fact that you didn't testify against me, even though you could have. The settlement terms you agreed to that left me with something to rebuild with when I get out. You could have destroyed me completely, Jeffrey, but you didn't. Jeffrey looked out his window at Seattle's skyline. I didn't do it for you, Jennifer. I did it because I needed to be able to live with myself. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it doesn't heal anything. Still, thank you. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. The weather, how Cloud Tech was doing, whether Jeffrey was dating anyone. He wasn't, but not for lack of interested parties. Then the automated system announced their time was up. Take care of yourself, Jeffrey, Jennifer said. You too, Jennifer. The line went dead. Jeffrey sat there for a while, thinking about the long, strange journey that had brought him here. From that night in the kitchen when Jennifer had handed him divorce papers, through the board meeting confrontation, to this moment of unexpected closure. He'd won. He'd gotten everything he'd fought for: control of his company, vindication of his worth, justice for the wrongs done to him. But victory, Jeffrey had learned, was more complicated than he'd expected. It wasn't pure triumph. It was mixed with loss and sadness and the recognition that winning sometimes meant everyone lost something. His father had been right. Winning wasn't the hard part. Knowing what you were actually fighting for, that was the challenge. And now finally Jeffrey knew. He'd been fighting for the right to be seen as he truly was, for the freedom to build a life on his own terms, for the peace that came from standing up for yourself without becoming the person who hurt you. He'd won those fights, and the victory, complicated and bittersweet as it was, felt real. Jeffrey turned back to his computer and opened a new document. He started typing, outlining plans for Cloud Tech's next phase: expansion into new markets, investment in employee development, partnerships that aligned with his values. He was building something now, not just a company, but a legacy, not defined by Jennifer or what she'd done to him, but by his own choices, his own vision, his own understanding of what success actually meant. And for the first time in years, Jeffrey felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Not hope that everything would be perfect, not hope that there wouldn't be more challenges ahead, but hope that he was finally on a path that was authentically his own. That was enough. That was everything. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.